Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking the Flash episode, Harry and the Harrisons. And honestly, I wasn't really quite feeling this episode. I guess at the end of the day, a lot of the humor that they're trying to go for in this episode just isn't really clicking with me. The Council of Wells, while kind of funny that one time, just sort of, I guess the best way to put it is, what they're going for with the Council of Wells, especially in this episode, and with some of what's going on with Amunet, it really feels more like the style of humor that they use on Legends of Tomorrow. And if you've watched my review of Legends lately, you know that I'm really kind of gotten very sick and tired of the just really ridiculous, over the top humor that they've employed on the show. Not that it isn't funny at times, it just sort of feels like the characters have become more about they have sometimes become more about these kind of dumb and cheap jokes than they have about these characters. And here, this episode, especially with the Council of Harrisons, it feels more like, well, what kind of wackiness can we have Tom Cavanaugh do this time? Oh, let's have him basically kind of act like Brooklyn Harrison Wells, like ridiculous New York City stereotype Harrison Wells. I think Charlie at Emergency Awesome kind of compared him to Andrew Dice Clay, the comedian from the 80s, which, that's maybe doing it a little much, but there's definitely some truth to that comparison there. Anyway, while that subplot did have its moments, it just sort of like, really? You have the chance to play around with all these alternate reality Harrison Wells, and you just basically decided, oh, well, here's Harrison Wells with a French accent, and here's Harrison Wells with a silly New York Italian guy accent. And it's just like, really? This is what you're going to do? I mean, I remember I've seen like some of these alternate reality stories where they do that, like with the Council of Ricks on Rick and Morty, or the Council of Reeds in the Fantastic Four comics, and they just really go to town. Like particularly like with the Council of Reeds, like there was one where it was like Reed Richards from a reality where he'd been turned into a vampire and was searching for a cure for his vampirism. I think there was like another one where like Reed Richards had become Sorcerer Supreme. There was another one where Reed Richards was actually a black woman. So yeah, they really kind of have the chance to just really go out there and try some crazy stuff. And they just sort of go like, well, okay, let's think of Harrison Wells, and then let's give him a ridiculous accent. Okay, let's give him an Australian accent and make it like Mad Max Harrison Wells. It's like, really? I mean, like the idea of a Harrison Wells who's like a Harrison Wells who's a cyborg is kind of cool. But why not kind of go with that? Harrison Wells whose humanity is fading away as he replaces more and more of himself with a machine. Okay, or hey, like why not do like Doctor Strange Harrison Wells, a Harrison Wells who opted to learn magic instead of science? I mean, maybe that's a little bit thin, but come on, there's like just so much more they could be doing with this. It's just like, ugh. And like, is like the French Harrison Wells the mime Harrison Wells we saw that one time too? Or are there like two really ridiculously French stereotypes Harrison Wells floating around in the multiverse? It's just like, oh my god. I mean, there are definitely these moments when I see things like these on this and on Legends. I'm just like, why am I taking my time out of my life to watch this? Really? Okay, all right. Well, that didn't work for me, but I can't say that this episode was not without its good points. Iris getting back into using her journalistic skills to sort of write the legend of the Flash, which we know is something that is destined to happen. That's good. This is one thing that is something that uniquely Iris can do. This is one place, like her one place where no one else on the show can do this like she can. That's really one of the places where she can seriously shine. And I'm glad that they're kind of getting back into that. The whole thing with with Caitlyn and Amunet, that was kind of interesting. I do like that you see Amunet here is a little bit more of a well-rounded character. She seems to have some genuine affection for Caitlyn, which kind of flies in contrast with the really terrible things she's done in the past. But her whole situation with like, hey, we need your help because this bad guy's gonna, turn everybody in the world into a dum dum if you don't help us stop them. And by the way, in case you didn't pick up on it, that includes you. And I mean, that quite reasonably points out, like, ugh, I don't want to work with you guys, but yeah, I don't want to be turned into a simple minded idiot either. So, okay, I will temporarily help you out on this one. And we do see that she does try and squeeze Caitlyn for a favor if once Killer Frost is restored, which is again in keeping with Amunet's character. But going back to stuff that doesn't work, as much as I love Katie Sackhoff, uh, it just sort of feels more like, okay, so we have Tom Cavanaugh doing ridiculous accents, and here's Katie Sackhoff doing ridiculous accents. I mean, granted, she's clearly having a very good time playing Anne Minette and is, really just diving into the character wholeheartedly, bringing quite a bit of charisma to the whole thing. But she doesn't really have the best material to work with, and again, it's just not clicking with me. But I do kind of like the idea of Amunet potentially as somebody who, a little bit more like on the kind of like where Captain Cold used to be. An enemy, but an enemy that, like it or not, you can, under certain circumstances, go to and work with him if you absolutely have to, because, there's a pretty bad situation. So a villain who's willing to put their differences aside, work with the hero, and genuinely does perhaps have some redeeming features. That's kind of why, in the more modern interpretation of Captain Cold, is such a beloved character, because there is that aspect to him. He's not an entirely evil person. He does have genuinely redeeming features. For example, in the comics, he's genuinely cares very much about his fellow rogues. He has a very strict code by which he believes the rogues should operate, and that line getting crossed is going to result in some very, very bad consequences for the rogue in question, which we have seen that, yeah, Captain Cold has no qualms about dealing that out. Yeah. Anyway, going along with this. Okay, at the end of the day, that Amunet said, like, okay, I've helped enough. I'm out of here. Good luck. Well, okay, no problem. I expected that. But the fact that she kind of gave Team Flash something that could help them out, okay, so that wasn't too badly done. And the fact that Amunet's goon has apparently, in her absence, turned around and turned himself into at least a somewhat capable bad guy who nailed the Flash a good one. All right, that's certainly not bad. I mean, it certainly did make him a little bit more of an interesting character and gave him something more than, oh, I can make a snake come out of my eye. Okay, I can roll with that. Let's see. The whole thing that the Thinker hasn't launched his plan because he doesn't want his wife to get caught up in the friendly fire, or whatever, however you would like to put it, of the Enlightenment. Now that's genuinely interesting. It does sort of show that there is perhaps some small bit of decency still left in him, perhaps. But it does give Team Flash an opening. I mean, the idea that they are going to have to team up with Marlize, and it's her and Team Flash that are going to take the Thinker down. Well, okay, we've all seen that coming for a long time. But, one thing about stories is that it's not always about the destination. It's about how you get there. I mean, kind of one of the things about Gotham, for example, is I remember and I've seen people make this comment multiple times. It's like, hey, I wonder whatever's going to happen to this Bruce Wayne kid. Like, well, of course we know. Or like people say, like, oh, well, why are we even bothered with the show? We know that Bruce Wayne is going to grow up to be Batman. Well, yeah, of course we all know that, but it's what happens between then and now. You know, what happens that makes these circumstances possible? What kind of twists and turns? Because it's not a straight line. And of course, you know, Gotham is kind of its own reality, so they can do their own thing. They can kind of make up their own mythology. Now, please, just so you know, I'm more than a season behind on Gotham, living in Japan, and I live in Japan, so I kind of have to rely on Netflix to stay up with that show. And I think we're still behind on that one a pretty good amount. I don't download illegally. Anyway, and I make it a point to stay away from extremely dubious Chinese streaming websites. But anyway, that's the kind of thing. We all know how this is going to play out towards the end, and we've known this for quite a while now, or several episodes at least. But how it happens, that's what's interesting. Which is kind of one of those reasons why that, despite their bad reputation, I don't think that prequels are necessarily bad things. They can be extremely interesting. It's how did we get from this point to what we are familiar with? And there is room for twists and turns and unexpected things if the writer is smart. And while not flawed, the Flash writers genuinely tend to do a fairly good job. Especially given that they've got comic book veteran like Geoff Johns floating around in the background, helping out with things, and of course him being one of the all-time great writers of the Flash. Anyway, guys, I think I'm good here, so let's call it. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.